My sister left me 56 missed calls accusing me of lying, but I wasn't about to let her in. Taylor's phone buzzed incessantly on her San Diego kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with Brooke's name for what felt like the 100th time that evening. 56 missed calls in 3 hours, each one accompanied by increasingly frantic voicemails accusing Taylor of lying about her whereabouts and demanding she open her apartment door immediately. The siege had started when Brooke arrived unannounced, expecting to crash on Taylor's couch indefinitely after her latest relationship imploded and left her homeless once again. But Taylor had learned from previous experience that Brooke's temporary stays lasted months and ended with missing money, damaged furniture, and violated boundaries that took years to rebuild. Through her peephole, Taylor could see Brooke pacing in the hallway, alternating between pounding on the door and frantically texting other family members about Taylor's cruel refusal to help during her crisis. The performance was calculated and familiar, designed to generate maximum guilt while painting Brooke as an innocent victim of circumstances beyond her control. Taylor's resolve wavered as she listened to Brooke's increasingly desperate voicemails, each one detailing her sister's dire situation with theatrical precision. But Taylor remembered the last time she'd opened her door to Brooke's crisis. 6 months of chaos that had cost Taylor her security deposit, her relationship with her previous boyfriend, and nearly her job when Brooke's drama followed her to the workplace. The accusations of lying stung because they contained just enough truth to be effective manipulation. Taylor was home, she did have a spare bedroom, and she could afford to help her sister financially. But Taylor had finally learned that having the ability to help didn't create an obligation to enable self-destructive behavior disguised as temporary hardship. Brooke's crisis followed a predictable pattern that Taylor had enabled for years: poor decisions leading to dramatic consequences, followed by emotional manipulation of family members who felt guilty for having stable lives while Brooke struggled. The cycle only ended when someone stopped participating in the rescue fantasy that prevented Brooke from facing real consequences. The emotional escalation outside Taylor's door intensified as Brooke realized her usual manipulation tactics weren't working, her voice carrying through the thin walls as she called their mother Susan to report Taylor's heartless behavior. The conversation was loud enough for Taylor to hear Brooke's version of events, which painted her as a desperate sister being abandoned by a sibling with resources to help. Taylor's phone immediately rang with Susan's number, the guilt trip delivered with maternal authority about family obligations and Christian values. But Taylor had prepared for this moment, having spent months in therapy learning to recognize and resist the emotional manipulation that had controlled her relationships with both her mother and sister for decades. The revelation that changed everything came through a neighbor's text message, accompanied by photos of Brooke unloading shopping bags from an expensive car in the parking lot. The images showed designer clothes and electronics worth thousands of dollars, contradicting Brooke's claims of poverty and desperation that had launched her campaign for sympathy and housing. Taylor realized that Brooke's current crisis wasn't financial hardship, but rather the consequences of spending her rent money on luxury items while expecting family members to cover her basic living expenses. The discovery transformed Taylor's guilt into anger, revealing how systematically Brooke had been lying about her circumstances to generate maximum emotional impact. When Taylor confronted Brooke through the door with evidence of her shopping spree, her sister's response was swift deflection and blame-shifting. Brooke claimed the purchases were necessary for job interviews, that families should support each other without questioning spending habits, and that Taylor's investigation proved she didn't really care about her sister's welfare. The argument that followed revealed the fundamental disagreement about family responsibility that had been poisoning their relationship for years. Brooke believed that having a stable sister created an obligation for Taylor to subsidize poor decisions, while Taylor had finally learned that love didn't require enabling destructive behavior regardless of blood relationships. Taylor's final decision came when she discovered that Brooke had been using her address to apply for credit cards and government assistance, forging signatures and claiming residency without permission. The identity theft was the line that transformed family drama into criminal behavior, forcing Taylor to choose between protecting herself and maintaining the illusion of sisterly loyalty. The police report Taylor filed that evening surprised Brooke, who seemed genuinely shocked that her actions had legal consequences beyond family disapproval. Her assumption that blood relationships provided immunity from prosecution revealed how little she understood about boundaries and accountability in adult relationships. Brooks' reaction to the fraud charges was predictably dramatic, involving threats of suicide and claims that Taylor was destroying their family over minor financial misunderstandings. But Taylor had learned to recognize emotional manipulation disguised as mental health crises, understanding that enabling Brooks' behavior ultimately harmed both of them by preventing real growth and accountability. The family schism that followed was painful but necessary, with Susan choosing to side with Brooks' victim narrative rather than confronting the reality of her younger daughter's manipulative behavior. Taylor accepted the loss of relationships built on her willingness to sacrifice her own welfare for people who refused to take responsibility for their choices. 6 months later, Taylor was living peacefully in her San Diego apartment, with changed locks and a restraining order that had finally stopped Brooks' harassment campaigns. Her sister had eventually found other family members willing to enable her lifestyle, though the criminal charges had made future identity theft more difficult. The 56 missed calls had become a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you could do was refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction, even when that person was family, and especially when they used emotional manipulation to avoid facing consequences for their actions. Taylor's therapy had taught her that guilt was often a sign that she was making healthy choices for toxic people who preferred her compliance over her well-being, and that real love sometimes required accepting the end of relationships rather than enabling behavior that prevented growth and accountability.